Good morning once again, PixelPop 2019 Festival people. I've been calling you Pixel Poppers. My name is Jordan, and I'm here to welcome you to our first talk of the day, Expanding Your Horizons, Emerging Opportunities for Game Devs with Christian Allen. Christian Allen is an experienced and BAFTA award-winning AAA game designer and creative director. Prior to joining Epic Games as the Unreal Engine Evangelist for North America, Christian served as lead designer, creative director, and design director for several AAA game projects for Ubisoft, Red Storm Entertainment, Microsoft, Bungie, and Warner Brothers, as well as founding and running an independent game development studio, Cerulean LLC. And I'd like to welcome Christian Allen to the stage.
All right, good morning, everybody. All right, so lively for a Sunday. All right, everybody had their coffee? The line's really long there, isn't it? Like all day yesterday I tried to get coffee and there's always like 30 people. So thanks for showing up on Sunday morning, and special thanks to PixelPop for inviting me out. I'm sure it has nothing to do with the fact that Unreal Engine is a sponsor, and they just really wanted to hear what I have to say. So today, this is my contact information. I'll follow this up at the end of the talk. Twitter @Cerulean. My LinkedIn is Christian Allen Designer, and you can send me Facebook invites, but I probably will just ignore them. So. But today I'm going to be here talking about expanding your horizons in game development and thinking about emerging opportunities for game devs. So when my team reached out to me for giving a talk here today, they said that the PixelPop folks had mentioned that they wanted something aspirational. Normally the talks that I give is an Unreal Evangelist, and just to make it very clear, I do work for Epic Games. I am an Unreal Evangelist, so a lot of my examples today will be for Unreal, but the stuff that I'm talking about today should apply to all game developers, regardless of what technology you're using. But normally I give a lot of technical talks. I talk about using blueprints and how to ship games in Unreal and technical aspects and sides of business. But I wanted to talk about opportunities for game development outside of specifically game development. And the intent of this talk is to really just kind of make you think, if you're using game technology, whether it be Unreal or Unity or GameMaker or your own technology that you built, some of the other opportunities that are available and really coming together as what I like to use the term convergence, as game technologies spread out into other fields. These may be things that you can use to supplement your income. These can be careers that you may expand into that utilize the knowledge base that you have. And especially for indie devs, they may be things that you can use to expand the portfolio of yourself, expand the portfolio of your studio. I know Bad Rhino here today is presenting over at the expo floor, and they are very diversified. They do game development, they do marketplace content for the Unreal Engine, and they do enterprise applications, which use all the same base technology, all the same knowledge base that they use can be expanded. And there's a lot of opportunity, and I think a lot of things that used to be blocked off into their own silos that you really had to dedicate a lot of time and energy if you wanted to expand into those areas are now available to the folks that really, those of us that are working in games, are really on the cutting edge of technologies and being able to apply your talents to multiple different fields. So because this is not a technical talk, I may go really fast and have lots of time with Q&A, which would be awesome, or I may get stuck on a little tangent and go really long, and we might not have a lot of time for Q&A. But I'll be around at the show. I'll be hanging out outside afterwards if you want to come ask me questions. If you don't want to come up to me personally, LinkedIn is the best way to hit me up. Twitter can work too, but it's Twitter. But LinkedIn, I do check my LinkedIn's every few days, so feel free to message me on there if you have any questions, regardless of whether it pertains to Epic Games or Unreal or anything. I'm always happy to talk to both current and aspiring game developers of anything. So just to give you a little bit about my background, this year marks my 20th year in game development. So I started as a modder in the late 90s. I was in the military, and I had gotten out and started making mods for a game called Rainbow Six Rogue Spear. And if you don't know what mods are, back in the day, it's kind of like Bethesda's Creators Club or creative mode in Fortnite, old school. But I was making mods, and I turned that into a job at Red Storm Entertainment, so I got hired as an assistant designer at Red Storm, which had just been recently acquired by Ubisoft. I quickly worked my way up to lead designer and then creative director on the Ghost Recon franchise, so I focused on Ghost Recon on the Xbox. Ended up creative director on Ghost Recon 2 Advanced Warfighter. I do also have Ghost Recon Future Soldier on this list and Ghost Recon Predator. Ghost Recon Future Soldier, I left during the early development. It was actually two different Tom Clancy franchises or games that got merged together. And if you start up the game and play it, the opening sequence has this side story mission of these three Ghost team members that went off rogue and they all got killed. And their names were Haynes, McGann, and Allen. And that's because the lead artist, one of the other designers, and myself, we all left during the development. So at the beginning of the game, they killed us. So that's kind of cool. And then Ghost Recon Predator down in the corner, just so I can say I worked on a PSP title. A few years after I left Ubisoft, I was reading a review of this Ghost Recon game, and I really recognized the story in it about the Ghosts trying to stop a war in Sri Lanka. And I started reading it more and more, and I was like, wait a minute, I wrote this. And it was a treatise, a pitch for a Ghost Recon game or a Clancy game that I'd written, and obviously someone in the Ubisoft organization had been digging around through their old pitches and thought that would be a good story for a game. So I figured I'd put it on my credits list. I don't know if I'm actually in the credits for the game. Then I moved on to Bungie, moved out to Seattle to work on Halo Reach. I was the design lead on the best Halo. There we go. By the way, yesterday was the 9th birthday of Halo Reach. It launched exactly 9 years ago yesterday. So that made me feel super old, so that was good. And then I went to Warner Brothers. I started at Warner Brothers as a design lead, quickly moved up to design director. I worked on Mad Max, which was really cool. Got to work with George Miller on developing that concept. And then did some work with different IPs on the movie side. Did some prototype work for Rampage, which turned into the really successful movie. You'll catch a little bit of a theme. Whenever I touch a movie franchise, it tanks. So that's why I don't work in Hollywood anymore. But did some work on Rampage, some other Midway IPs, because we had just acquired Midway, so Spy Hunter, Rampage, Smash TV, a few different things like that. And then ended up working on this cool new game that was originally going to be The Hobbit, the movie, the game. And I lobbied pretty hard against that and was successful, and that birthed the new franchise, Middle-earth, Shadows of Mordor. I did early prototyping and concept on that. After I left Warner Brothers, I went the indie route. I finally had the big opportunity to have my own studio, ran a Kickstarter, raised a couple $100,000 on that. Yay, Kickstarter, they were here yesterday. And shipped a game called Takedown Red Saber on PC and Xbox. During that same time, I got my other big Hollywood, this was going to be my Hollywood breakout gig. I got a consulting gig with Will Smith's company, Overbrook Entertainment, to do the video game adaptation of After Earth. So I worked on what eventually ended up being a mobile title for that. And as we know, Mobile Earth has spawned a massive science fiction franchise. I actually did a few months ago see a whole run, probably about 60 novel adaptations for After Earth in Barnes & Noble. So someone made that and printed it and shipped it, which is pretty exciting. If you're not familiar, After Earth completely tanked as well. So went on to ship an early access game on Steam called Epsilon, and then my final project while I was independent was an experimental title that started actually as a Gamma Sutra article called Hotel Blind, which was ended up being a VR title about being a blind person trapped in a hotel room. It was based on a This American Life story with Ira Glass by an author named Ryan Knight, who is a blind professor about the time he was trying to find a phone in a hotel room. And I was writing a Gamma Sutra article on how to become an indie dev. It was called 10 Steps to Becoming an Indie Dev, and it was basically like, get a laptop, download Unreal, start making games. And people on Gamma Sutra, some of the comments were, that's way too simplistic, that's not how it works, you have to have all these planning and stuff. And I was like, well, fine, I'll just do it. And that afternoon, I had picked my daughter up from soccer practice, and I was driving back, and the This American Life story was on the radio. And I said, well, I'm a designer, and I'm not an artist, so game about a blind person sounds really cool. So check that out. It's got terrible reviews on Steam. It's really hard. It's the most disorienting virtual reality experience that you can pretty much have. So that's my game development background. Internally at Epic, as Unreal Evangelist, my role, one, is to do a lot of this kind of stuff. I travel around the country, United States and Canada, and speak at conferences and talk about using an Unreal Engine. And then on the biz dev side, I really focus on indie game developers. So my primary goal is to help indie game developers develop their games in Unreal, ship those games, and generate revenue for themselves. Because our royalty, or our business model for Unreal Engine is royalty based. So people download the engine for free, they make games, they ship them, they make money, and then we make money. So it's a pretty cool opportunity for me as a game designer to be able to help smaller studios be able to ship their titles, again with the prime motivation of helping them be hopefully profitable. And this is an example project called Parachess. This is something that I built all by myself, completely using blueprints in Unreal. Again, I'm a designer, I'm a scripter. That's my background. I'm not a coder or an artist. And then all the assets that you see are all available for free on the Unreal Marketplace for anybody to download. So I have a whole pitch on that that I can talk to you about if you're interested. I'm not going to focus on it here. So when I was thinking about what kind of aspirational talk I should give, a lot of time I go to a lot of conferences and I hear a lot of talks. I've been on the faculty for GDC, I think 6 or 7 years. I kind of stopped keeping track. So I go to a lot of the big conference tracks. Just a few weeks ago I was at the gamesindustry.biz summit along with one of the other speakers here from Kickstarter, talking about investment opportunities and the Epic mega grants and things like that. And I hear a lot of aspirational speeches that tend to not have a lot of action points. One of the things I liked about the investment summit is that room was filled with people that were running businesses. So they want concrete, actionable things to execute on. And a lot of the times, especially from game designers, you sit down for these aspirational talks and they're like, okay, number one, make sure your game is fun. I'm not going to tell you how to do that, but make sure it's fun. 2, make sure it sells. That's good. And then 3, make sure your next game is fun. Okay, cool. All right, well, we got that. So make fun games, sell them, and then make more fun games. That's awesome. But I like to think about actionable things and things that could maybe not be talked a lot about in other realms, especially when people are pitching things. And it brought me back to this idea of convergence. I first heard the term convergence when I worked at Ubisoft. In the mid-2000s, there was this strong concept that Hollywood and game development were coming together. And Yves Guillemot, who's the head of Ubisoft, loved the term convergence whenever he talked about Hollywood. So he would talk about how the development of intellectual property from movies to games were converging together with this kind of idea that in the future you would just create an intellectual property and you would have a movie IP and a game IP and a book IP and it would all be one thing and you wouldn't really have this separation. I don't know if that's come to pass. It's 2019 and we still have Assassin's Creed the movie, which was okay. Most movie IPs or TV IPs of video games, we're beyond the days of Mario Brothers movies, thankfully. And kind of, to me at least, Resident Evil is kind of like the gold standard of movie IPs because they mainly just took the character looks and the themes and threw everything else away. Which I guess that's what Hollywood does, right? They acquire IP and then remake it. But what I'm seeing today, especially over the last year, that I've been thinking a lot about, is this convergence of the basic talent, skill set, and technology that's used to create digital IPs. So whether it be video games, whether it be movies, whether it be tools, really we're seeing a lot of crossover and back and forth. It's always kind of been like that. At Red Storm specifically in like 2003, we realized that we should probably get concept artists, that we could have people that could draw things on paper before we dedicated 20 people to build them for 6 months, and that might be a good idea. So we went out and we got some concept artists, and we mainly pulled them from TV and movies. So some of those folks, and comic books. Comic books was another big place. Some of those folks are still working in games, and a lot of them have gone back to movies. Some of the movies and TV. Some of the concept artists I work with, like Craig Gilmore, did a lot of work for Walking Dead, and I'm terrible with names, a few other TV series that have since, I think, The 100, and a few other science fiction IPs. So we already had this kind of convergence. A lot of character artists and concept artists would come into games. A lot of times then they would go back. But games and film were very separated in the way they're developed. Movies get made much more quickly once they're greenlit. They tend to incubate for much, much longer time than games, and then get made extremely quickly, whereas games tend to incubate for much less time and then get made over a longer course of time. But today, with the convergence of the technology, you're seeing a lot more opportunities for that crossover. And I'll touch on some of those points as we go through. So that's where kind of this idea for this talk came from, is just thinking about what that convergence means and how especially indie developers and aspiring AAA developers can leverage that opportunity. And when I say leverage, I'm really thinking about how can you expand your portfolio, how can you expand your career, and how can you expand your revenue generation opportunities. A lot of the times as an indie dev, if you just start on an independent game and it takes you a year and a half to make it, if you don't have any other funding sources, you're working a full-time job. And hopefully that full-time job either provides some kind of support or feedback into what you're trying to do as a game developer, whether it's just inspiration of seeing the people every day that you want to replicate in your games or inspire your games. But if you look at some of these other opportunities, they can contribute directly to the skill set that you're building by building your game and shipping your game into some of these other things. So I'll just jump right into it. I'm just going to talk through some of these slices, and I'm kind of I futzed around with the order that I'm going to talk about these things, from kind of like, I thought about, well, I should do the most inspiring first, but that can also be some of the most challenging. So I thought I'd go with simulation first because it's kind of the easiest. Simulation has been around, longer than games. People using digital mediums to do simulation. When I say simulation, I really mean things that are built for generally government, NGO, business enterprise, where they're taking generally something that's either really risky or something that's really expensive, might take a lot of data inputs and generating it. So the thing you think a lot about, or at least I do, things like airplanes, military simulation. Obviously there's a lot of opportunities there, but it traditionally used to be like extremely siloed. Simulation technology generally used proprietary software, would generally be completely separate from games. The simulation folks really looked down on game development because it was like, oh, that's for kids and making things fun, and we do really serious work here and it's really important. And then the games people look down on simulation because like, oh, that's old fogey stuff and really ugly and boring and not exciting. But one of the interesting things, two examples here, actually I don't know what the lower right one, some kind of military simulator. But the one in the upper left is HTX Labs. They're down in Texas, and they build multiple different kind of simulation technology, fire safety, active shooter training, biohazard stuff, and then this is one of their plane simulators. The technology, simulation has finally realized that games render stuff really, really good. Games are very, very good at that. And now with the expansion of game engines, they also do simulation extremely well. A few years ago in 2008, if I had grabbed one of these simulation developers and sat them down and walked them through the physics simulation that happens in every single Halo match that goes on all around the world, it blew most of their simulators away. There's a ton of physics simulation going on. And the simulation world has realized that if it can do unrealistic physics really well, maybe it can do really realistic physics really well. So there's a lot of opportunity there. Like I said, the simulation community is starting to realize the power of game engines. There's still things to work around. A lot of the government regulations when it comes to simulation about siloing data and things like that, and obviously security clearances and cross-country challenges. There's a lot of challenges in it, but there's a lot of opportunity there too. And a lot of these programs tend to be multi-year funded efforts. So if you're looking around your community, say you're an indie game developer and you want to get a job, in games, don't forget to look in the simulation world, because there's a lot of opportunity there. But I'm not going to go super deep. I'm not going to go super deep into any of these. I really want to just kind of make you think about all these different opportunities. So architecture and interior design. This is another one kind of next step up from the excitement standpoint. I think artists, when we're looking at the simulations here, artists start getting a little, their eyes start to droop. Game designers, when it comes to this point, their eyes really droop. But artists start to light up. When we see the expansion in capability for real-time lighting, real-time ray tracing, and how these things can affect the presentation of architecture, the advancement in the art of presenting architecture in just the last 3-4 years has blown me away. Like just the presentations that people are putting together and the ability to build a beautiful, wonderful portfolio in architecture, whether it be in actual architectural design, in interior design and layout, in those things is just really amazing. A lot of the presentation pieces that people are showing is just amazing. And anybody that's skilled in level design and environment art can sit down and make just completely amazing presentations in the architecture world. Unreal specifically is making a big push into architecture. And when I say architecture, I kind of combining, all these different things: interior design, layout, planning, all these things kind of into one. A lot of the older architecture world would again use proprietary technology, or things like CAD. A CAD file for a 10-story building with all the detail that it needs to have to be approved by a building developer isn't something that you could just pull into a game engine 10 years ago and hit render, right? Everything would just explode because every bolt on a stairwell was 10,000 polys, right? It was just like insane. I had a conversation just recently with a company that does stadium renders for a company that sells seats at college sports stadiums. And what they would do is they would build the entire stadium in Max, and then they would hand place every seat. And then in each seat, they would render 3 different views from that seat and kick it out to the website. So if you wanted to go buy a ticket for I don't know, sports, a Dogs game, you would go click on that seat and you could see the 3 renders. And, they were interested. Their pipeline was very chunky. The stuff looked really good, but every time a advertiser changed in that stadium, like a sign, they would go in, they'd open up the just giant Max file, they'd delete the old sign, they'd take, the new Doritos sign, put it in, and then manually calculate every seat that could see that sign and re-render all of those things. And they had literally people, so if you can imagine a 20,000 seat arena, 3 renders per seat, and now I have to calculate all this stuff. I talked them through how you would do that in blueprints in Unreal, and it's like, yeah, you would just have the blueprint, every time you wanted to run the render, you would have every seat, run a blueprint calculation check to see if, they had line of sight to, an object that had changed, and just automatically render out the ones that would change, and then you're good to go. And it just totally blew them away. So there's a lot of opportunity there. On the opposite side, we're doing specifically, I think, game engine technology and Unreal specifically are doing a big focus on training and educating people from the architecture field into the fundamentals that as a game developer you already know. I sat in a training session where one of our educators set up, and he had a scene set up, and he said, I'm going to explain to you how you can use streaming levels. right? Does anybody know what a streaming level is in game development? Couple people. Okay, streaming level is, if you're moving through a Gears of War, as you move through a space and you come to a door, generally the next chunk of the level is streaming in while you're moving through the space. And then the space behind you is streaming out. That's kind of the old school way of thinking about it. These days with open world games, you use streaming levels in a much more dynamic thing, but that's essentially what they are. And this developer was up there, and he's showing, you can imagine this scene on the right, where you have the person standing next to the big windows. He said, now I can use streaming levels to demonstrate whether this space with these windows, now let's say we wanted to put a Starbucks cafe there, and we can show you what that looks like. And he went click, and the windows disappeared, Starbucks cafe appeared, and it was like, the whole audience was like, wow, like that's amazing, like just one button press. And it went like that, and that's because he had he had built this cafe or whatever on a separate streaming level. While he'd been doing the beginning of the presentation, that streaming level had streamed in, was loaded into memory, and as soon as he clicked the button, it just auto-clicked over. So being able to present like that as an architect to show different options to the client is just a great opportunity. They don't have to stop and go, oh, you want to see the version with the cafe? Hold on, let me open that, and or I've just got still shots of that, and then the client goes, well, what's it look like from over here? Oh, well, let me show you. I'll just move it over here. So the advantages of real-time rendering and game technology and architecture are huge. And again, a great environment artist from games can really bring that to the next level. So that's a big opportunity. There's tons of companies out there that are doing products for people to do interior design pre-visualization. This expands into AR. Lowe's has an application to be able to preview paint colors, where you can scan the paint colors in the store for their whatever brand paint they have, then you can come back in an AR, hold your phone up, and look at those paint colors in your space. That's all game technology. That's all technology that you can use in Unreal right now. Those are opportunities for game developers to jump on, and you already have the skill set and the drive, and again, it can come back and support the techniques that you can use in doing awesome looking and efficient architecture and interior design. Those are all skill sets that apply right back to game development. So film and TV. This was originally going to be my first one because it's been super cool to see the advancement. But, saying that like, yeah, I want to make games and on the side I'm going to work on movies. Maybe a little bit too aspirational. But never before today has the convergence of game technology been more apparent in movies as it is today. When we look at movies like the Star Wars prequel, that was completely, entirely shot, well, not completely, but mostly shot on green screen, right? And we can tell when you watch it, right? You can tell that the actors don't have any reference points for what's going on around them. Even, in the really great scenes like Anakin and Obi-Wan's sword fighting on the lava planet, all those action sequences are really, really awesome, but when a lava piece flies by Anakin's head, he doesn't react, he doesn't see it, he doesn't blink. A lot of times even the light doesn't naturally reflect off the people. There's a really great breakdown that I highly recommend where a set of YouTubers goes back through the Scorpion King movie, which is known for having some of the worst CGI in film ever, with The Rock as this like plastic scorpion person comes out, and they go back and just use modern technology and basically spend like 2 days and relight that scene, and it looks awesome. Well, it doesn't look awesome. It looks way better. But even when I was working with George Miller and Peter Jackson and going to the production sets of Mad Max and The Hobbit, and seeing, those are real two cutting-edge directors. A lot of people don't know George Miller with Mad Max Fury Road. His other movies include Happy Feet. And that's an amazing digital production with amazing performances and really set the bar for 3D rendered movies. And obviously the work that he did on Fury Road, most people don't think about Mad Max Fury Road as a highly CG movie. And that's because he did a really, really good job with Fury Road and the CG and the way that he composited the shots and worked together and brought the old school Hobbit, maybe not so much on that front. I think Peter Jackson was a little bit ahead of the time on some of bringing CGI into movies, and also maybe got a little bit too hampered by some of the choices on film and the 24 FPS and stuff like that. But when I went to the set of The Hobbit, the Mirkwood set was built up to about, I think it was about 10 feet tall. So they physically built the Mirkwood set. It was all physical up to about 10 foot tall. And of course it was scaled up because it was all supposed to be dwarves and hobbits who are all shorter than real life. And it's really interesting to go into the Hobbiton Bilbo's house because they actually have 2 scale sets. One for Hobbit scale and one for Gandalf scale. But when you go into that, when I went into that Mirkwood set and everything above 10 feet was just a green screen. And it was like, oh, okay, so, this is the physical stuff so people can, react to trees and walk around things. And I think they filmed like 5 different scenes on this one little wood set. But everything else was digital, and like, okay, we're going to do all that digital stuff up there in post. So all the tops of the trees and things coming down. And that's neat and all. But you could kind of tell when you watch The Hobbit. You could tell those transitions. Excuse me. And what's changed today is, in the examples here, we have Jon Favreau, and his latest movie was The Lion King, and now he's working on The Mandalorian TV show. And their team has integrated virtual production into the role. And the way that that's fundamentally changed things is it's not just we'll do it in post of, here's our actors and there's a cityscape in the background and, they fight and do their thing and then we'll go put buildings and we got to have the blue beam of light shooting up into the sky, so we'll put that in and, there'll be lots of alien ships. But you still have that fundamental disconnect. What you can do now in virtual production is go, okay, well, we're going to have that green screen there, or even now we're going to have an LED wall there, actual physical LED wall, present in the space, displaying the digital part of the movie that the actors can look and actually see the big thing. And it's not a person with a ping pong or a tennis ball attached to a stick going, roar, roar, roar. And the director can be looking at that and say, okay, you know what? The sun is just not in the right place. I can look, the sun's right behind my actors. I want to move the sun 30 degrees to the right, and let's relight that scene and take a look at it now. Okay, 20 minutes later, cool, yeah, that looks good. Okay, let's roll with that. Or here comes the dragon. Everybody can turn and look in the dragon, and there's a dragon, and they're reacting to it. And the movie producer or director can react to those things, change them real time, have those things affect the actor, affect the scene, and that's really shifting how movies are being made and film is being made. Obviously, just from a production standpoint, the integration of CGI and game technology, the movie in the lower left, can anybody remind me of the name? It starts with an M. Maro, yeah, it's got a weird pronunciation. It was a movie with Steve Carell, I think, was the lead actor on that, and another cast of wonderful actors, where he goes into a fantasy land of these G.I. Joe and Barbie dolls. And they developed, working in Unreal, they developed a lot of new facial capture technology. The shot on the lower left is all digital, but if you know the actors in the scene, you can look at those dolls and reference which actor they are, and all that is the actual actors doing facial capture mapped onto those 3D models and then rendered into the movie, and it had a really seamless transition between the quote-unquote real-life scene and the doll scene that really brought that movie and won a ton of awards. But again, as a character modeler, as a texture artist, as a lighting artist, all these different kinds of developers, a blueprint scripter, someone was in there doing blueprints in this scene and in this movie. All those are available now to game developers. And a lot of times what I see is movie folks that have been, the big name VFX artists are reaching out to game developers and going, how can you help us make this more efficient? In the old days with that post-production process, when they said, let's do it in post, that means let's render it and send it to our render farm and, wait a week for it to render and then come back and then we can move on to the next scene. When I was down with Peter Jackson, I got to visit Weta and their digital production studio, Weta Digital, and then there's I want to make sure it's recorded. Okay. Anyway, I was down there and they showed me the 3D model for the main character's shirt when he was turned into a Navi, and he wore this shirt to kind of denote that he was a human. And looking at the level of detail and the multiple dozens of layers of materials and textures that were in that shirt, and they said, "Hey, you guys can use this in games." And I was like, "No, you know, a game could not render this shirt in real time on an Xbox, so that isn't going to work." But these days, again, with the convergence of that technology together, the movie production and TV production want to be able to do that stuff real time. They want to be able to shift real time, see what it's going to be look like in real life. It's not enough for them to be able to go, okay, well, now I'll send these nerds out for 6 months to go render all this stuff and just hope that it comes together and looks good. Thank you so much. Improvise, adapt, overcome. I like it. All right, so I'm got about 15 minutes. So that's movie production. Again, you know, it's still, Hollywood is still a closed world, but I'll get into some of the, I'm going to kind of finalize on some of the opportunities when it comes to real-time movie and TV production there. Product design. Product design is and has been, again, much like simulation and architecture, it's been around forever. It's nothing new to say that people use computers to model stuff. But what industry is learning today is that all the time and money and effort that they sink into doing the modeling and the research and the building of 3D models of their products in order to get them built and funded, they could still use that content to, say, market it or provide tools to their customers. On the right, we have a McLaren configurator demo that's using assets that were built for actual production, applying that, allowing the customer to customize their McLaren, which when I buy my McLarens, I expect to be able to go in and customize things. The last one I looked at didn't have enough cup holders, so whatever. I got a Nissan. But all that content that's being built is being utilized, whether it's through marketing, whether it's through sales, whether it's through stuff. And the resolution detail is important, but the key aspect is, again, being performant. They are now starting to think about when we build this content, it's just not just to ship to the product manufacturer. We want to be able to use this for an AR app. We want to be able to use this for on the web. We want to be able to use this for real time in TV. We want to be able to use this for all these things. So it has to be performant. It has to work well. And how do we do that? Game engine, real time technology. So there's a lot of opportunity there as well. And one of the great things about the product side is it really is spread out across North America. So wherever you're based, whether it be in the Midwest, in Canada, East Coast, West Coast, there's opportunities all across North America for this. Medical. I won't spend too much time on medical, but there is some really exciting things. And for a game designer, medical can be really, really exciting. Medical simulation, the benefits to humanity are obviously awesome. Being able to create virtual reality simulators for doctors and surgeons and dentists to train in is really cool. Again, it's not anything really new, but bringing all these different technologies together, harnessing the power of game technology. For the example on the left, which is some kind of simulator of brain stuff with blood vessels that doctors use. When I'm doing research on automatically estimated blood vessel categorization by dominant region, I like to use game technology. No, it's a simulator where the graph is basically on the left. You have your diagnostic data that you're pulling out of real-time medical diagnostic tools, pushing it into a simulation to simulate some kind of brain trauma or problem, blockage, I believe, and then testing the doctor on what the solution for that is. So they can go and simulate, oh, this looks like a blockage in this part of the brain, so I'm going to work my doctor magic and find out the results. And then on the right is more of a traditional VR simulator. I assume in this they're using a medical screwdriver to put a battery into someone's shoulder blade that they've ripped out of their body. So there's a lot of opportunity there. Medical, I'm going to talk therapeutic and research a little bit separate, but there's a lot of opportunity there from governments, from schools and academia on doing research. Right now there's a big push, there still is a big push, been going for a couple years, on doing a lot of simulation for evaluation on virtual reality training. So, doctors can't just say like, oh yeah, this virtual reality stuff is cool, we're going to do all our training in this now instead of on cadavers. They need data to back that up. So right now there's a lot of effort being put into, can we do side-by-side studies with cadaver training versus virtual reality training, or the implementation of artificial reality through mobile and things like that. So a lot of opportunity there, and again, a lot of the skill set that you're going to use for UX and UI, user interface design, is going to translate directly right into this. When you think about taking a surgeon trainee and having them pick up a virtual reality simulator and start doing whatever they're doing to shoulder blades, UX is a huge part of that because the technology can't be a blocker. The technology has to let them get in quickly and start doing the things they do. So a fundamental part of game design is UX, right? You want your player in, you want your player playing the game, not trying to figure out how to use the controller. Well, that's exactly the same skill set that you can bring to something like medical simulation. Real-time VFX. I separated this out from the movie TV just because it is really an emerging thing that I think I just get really excited about. So on the upper left, we have the Weather Channel. They made a big, quote-unquote, splash. Get it? Big splash with their real-time VFX during a hurricane a few years ago where they were doing these. This is a screenshot from their live show where the presenter, she's in the space and she's standing at her desk and she's like, oh no, a hurricane's coming. And then the waves start rising and the storm comes in, and they've also built a set that uses physical like lighting and wind and stuff that helps work with this. It's kind of like an old school Disney ride, except live on TV. This was all built in the Unreal Engine. And they're going to continue to push that through forward. I think that's something that's going to be moving forward altogether. And a lot of times these companies that are working in real-time VFX tend to be a little more agnostic and open to folks like us that want to reach out and provide our skill set. They're not kind of siloed off like some of the Hollywood studios where they've got their folks and they kind of do their thing. There's some really cool opportunity moving forward. In the lower left, this was a demonstration that was built, I believe, for SIGGRAPH, a real-time VFX where the creator, I believe Matt Workman is the person in that photo, and a team used LED walls in the background, real-time Unreal Engine to film this cool scene with a motorcycle. And the funniest thing is I knew that that's what they were working on, but we hadn't announced it yet. And he posted a video on LinkedIn where as soon as he got the scene fully rendered, or he not as soon as, but he had access to the scene in Unreal. So one of the things he did is he opened it up and he was like moving around in the scene to try to get a sense for it. And he said, well, I wonder if I can get on the motorcycle. And he did. He got on the motorcycle and started driving it around the scene. And then he drove it off the scene. And then he drove it off into the gray world and then fell off the world. And then the motorcycle tumbled down. Because it was a game engine. It was just a game scene built in Unreal. And that's exactly what he's standing in there. So a lot of cool opportunities for real-time VFX. Again, a lot of different companies doing a lot of different elements of this that you can go out and research, and opportunities to, again, build your skill set. And so last point I'll touch on, I'm getting real tight on time, but therapeutic and research. So this is an example from a company called C4X Discovery, which does chemical and medicinal research, again using the Unreal Engine for a lot of their blueprint system for data input and doing that kind of stuff. There's a lot of opportunity there. Obviously, if you're a game designer, UX, production, producer, project management can utilize all the same strengths that you'd use in game development. And therapy and therapeutic products are something that that I get really excited about. I'm a disabled veteran. I work with a lot of disabled veteran organizations. Things like therapy for TBI, pediatric therapy for kids on the spectrum to allow them to use game applications to be calm or to help with therapy are really exciting. A lot of the same aspects as game design. If you think you're making, if you think about making an indie game that anybody can pick up and play, well, how could that help a autistic child that needs to sit and do a repetitive task for 2 hours? That can be extremely difficult for a child. If they have to sit and they need to do physical therapy and bounce on a ball for an hour to help strengthen back muscles. Wouldn't it be great if they had a application on an iPad that they could use to help calm themselves down? So a lot of opportunities there. I just got my 5 minutes, so I'm going to hopefully open it up for some questions in the last few minutes. I do want to touch on, before I wrap up, Epic Mega Grants. Epic Mega Grants is a $100 million fund that is created by Epic to help fund projects built in Unreal, projects that want to move to Unreal, or projects, importantly, that just benefit the 3D production community in general. One of the biggest ones we just recently announced was over $1 million grant for Blender, because we see the opportunity for having an open source 3D production platform that everybody can have access to. So if you're working on something like that, whether it be a game, any of the enterprise things that I talked about today, therapy, medical, architecture, product design, all that stuff, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. Everybody likes money. I assume, well, not everybody, but most people like money, and money helps to build things, and we want you to build awesome things. So feel free to touch base, and with that, I'd like to open it up for Q&A until I get cut off. Thank you. All right, so we don't have a lot of time, so let's have the first Q&A. Who's going to be the brave person that raises their first? I know it's hard to raise your arm the first time, so who's going to ask the first question? All right, go ahead.
I really like what I highlighted all of the industries that are build your game design skill sets.
Mm-hmm.
What would you suggest to people who are working in something like how to find those persons? Because say no, this isn't like exactly a game design, but like studio journey.
Yeah.
So I think like having going back to very helpful with those skills.
Mm-hmm.
So in the context of ethics specifically, but just more broadly, like how, like what resources are available, or how do people discover those types of.
Got it. So that's a great question. So the question is, I just talked about all these applications that you can expand your skill set in and possibly, have career growth in. How do you find that stuff? Excuse me. Well, one of the things, it's like I had that slide ready to go. It was actually when I moved to the end because I didn't know if I had time to get it. Look at, go look at the technology companies. Look at UnrealEngine.com, look at Unity, look at Blender, and look at the tech blogs that they have. Because when someone builds something cool in Blender, Unity, or Unreal, we as companies want to promote that. And we're like, every image that you saw in that presentation was off UnrealEngine.com, where I just searched architecture and went, oh, that looks cool. Oh, therapeutic. Okay, that looks cool. And so that can help really, look at the products that you're good at using. I'm sure Max and Maya and Autodesk probably do the same thing. That can be a really good window for the layperson to be exposed to something that you might not know about before. And then you can take that and research, oh, in my area, there might be companies that do these kinds of things. So yeah, there's not like a monster.com where you can go and put in like, I have game development skills, and show me the things that my skill set can apply to. But I think if you're in game development, you're building games, you can kind of get a sense for, what are my skill sets? I'm an environment artist, I'm a UI designer, I'm a producer, I'm a PM. What are these things? What can I apply to? Same with things like AWS, Amazon Web Services, Azure, Microsoft AI, like looking at those tech blogs and seeing where those types of technologies are. There's a lot of these industries that are screaming out for qualified people. They're like, we need people to do this stuff. And part of it is because a lot of people don't really know about it. They're very kind of siloed off industries, and they have a hard time reaching out to a broader, more diverse workforce. Next question? It's going to be one more question. About anything. Mm-hmm.
I don't think of game development as a programs. I know it's more.
Yeah, so the question is, what does make what makes a qualified person? And I kind of rattled off all these different skill sets. The games industry has really, over the course of the last 20 to 30 years, has really specialized. So, every aspect of game development that you see, when I say UI, I generally mean screens. The interfaces, user interface that you're going through. So, something like mobile development is really heavy in that. If someone's making a phone application, that's all UI. So someone that's been making menus for video games for 10 years, this is really easy. Like, this is just a tiny little screen and you only have a few buttons. I don't want to say it's easy, but I mean, it's very simple compared to doing, settings for a PC game or a PlayStation, available settings. Like, it's way simpler. And so, as you move into games industry, whether it's from your education or building your own content, you tend to find where you fit. I'm a game designer. I'm probably the most, we're maybe outside of project management, the most ambiguous skill set, right? Like, every game designer at every company does different things depending on the technology they work in. I got one mic. So, it really is about finding what your skill set is, whether that be programming, design, art, project management, and then just looking for applications to that. So I'll take one more question and then I got to wrap. Come on, one more question. Are we hiring? Is Epic Games hiring? Yes, Epic Games is hiring. epicgames.com/careers. We are hiring across the country. We've got our home bases in Raleigh, North Carolina. We've also got, I work out of Seattle. We've got a mobile development studio in Salt Lake City. And then we've got smaller offices both around the United States. We've got offices in Montreal in Canada, and probably have some more. And then all around the world as well. We've got regional offices, Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, and Europe, all over the place. So highly, if you are kicking rear in the Unreal Engine and you are super awesome, we are looking to talk to you. So you can always reach out to me. I can help connect you with that, but the web is the best place to go. If you might have heard, we've gone through a bit of growth in the past couple years. We had this game that was mildly successful called Fortnite, and that pulled a lot of our resources, both internally and externally onto that project. So we're also supporting Unreal and doing all our expansion into enterprise. So we are actively hiring, and we're doing good. And I just got the times up, so I want to say thanks to PixelPop, thanks to you for being here on a Sunday morning, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much. 3 mics I went through. That's awesome.